Attention! If you've ever felt the world turn its back on you, this story is for you. Are you ready to discover how betrayal can become your greatest strength? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video so you don't miss any of our inspiring stories. At the reception, no one understood the Russian millionaire until the cleaner offered him tea in perfect Russian. Everyone was perplexed, not imagining that she would be the one to break the silence. A deep sigh escaped Amelia's lips as she observed the reflection of her reddened hands on the polished marble of the counter. It was 5 a.m., and the Grand Imperial Hotel in London was already beginning to awaken with the first rays of sun filtering through the large windows. The silence of dawn was only interrupted by the soft hum of the vacuum cleaner that her colleague, Chloe, was pushing across the lobby carpets. Amelia adjusted the collar of her light blue uniform and continued to polish the surface with circular movements. At 20, she had never imagined that her years of study would end like this, with a rag and yellow gloves, cleaning the invisible remnants left by people who never noticed her existence. But life takes unexpected turns, like the one that led her to fall madly in love with Russian literature during her university years. Dostoevsky brought me here, she thought, with an ironic smile, as she remembered how she had abandoned her promising career in philology to immerse herself in the study of the Russian language, fascinated by being able to read the great masters in their original tongue. A decision her family never understood, and which now, in times of economic crisis, had left her with no choice but to accept this temporary job. The jingle of keys at the main entrance interrupted her thoughts. It was too early for guests. Amelia looked up and saw a tall man enter, with broad shoulders and perfectly combed dark hair. His navy blue suit seemed to have been sewn directly onto his body, and he carried only a black leather briefcase. The man approached the reception desk with determined steps, where Robert, the night receptionist, struggled to keep his eyes open until the end of his shift. Robert's confused expression was instantaneous. The newcomer repeated the phrase, this time more slowly, as if the problem was speed and not language. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand." "Do you speak English?" Robert asked in rudimentary English. The man sighed in frustration and searched for something on his phone. After a few seconds, he showed the screen to Robert. "Reservation. Dmitry Volkov," he said with a marked accent, clearly reading a translation. Robert nodded and began typing on his computer, visibly relieved to have at least understood the name. "Mr. Volkov, yes, here is your reservation. But I need your passport and to complete some details." Robert gestured as he spoke, pointing to documents. The frustration on the Russian's face grew with each second. Amelia observed the scene as she continued to polish the same spot on the counter, already shining like a mirror. She immediately recognized the language. Those words, those inflections she had studied for years, resonated in her ears like a familiar melody. The man, Dmitry Volkov, lightly tapped the counter with his fingers. He didn't seem angry, but rather resigned, like someone accustomed to not being understood. "Does anyone speak Russian?" "Fluent English?" Robert asked, looking around desperately, unaware that Amelia was a few feet away. Something inside Amelia stirred. This was the first time in years she had the opportunity to use her knowledge of Russian outside the books and films she devoured alone. She hesitated for a moment, aware of her position, her uniform, her yellow gloves. But then, the man spoke again, this time with a tone of surrender. "I just want to rest. It's been a long flight," Amelia mentally translated, and before she could think better of it, she took off her gloves and approached. "Mr. Volkov," she said in English, and then continued in Russian. The man's steel blue eyes widened in surprise, fixing on her for the first time. His gaze quickly swept over her uniform, the yellow gloves that now hung from her pocket, and finally stopped at her face. A slight smile of relief appeared on his lips. He replied, and the deep timbre of his voice sent a strange shiver down Amelia's spine. Amelia translated for Robert, explaining that Mr. Volkov needed to check in and wished to go to his room as soon as possible. As she acted as interpreter, she noticed how the Russian's gaze did not leave her, studying her with an intensity that made her feel strangely visible for the first time in a long time. The check-in was completed in minutes. Robert, relieved, handed the electronic key to Volkov and called the bellhop to accompany him with his luggage, which would arrive later. Volkov said to Amelia, and added in surprisingly clear English, though with a strong accent, "Thank you." "You're welcome, Mr. Volkov," she replied, putting her yellow gloves back on, as if that brief interlude was over, and she should return to her invisibility. The man paused before following the bellhop. "What's your name?" he asked in that basic but functional English. "Amelia. Amelia Davies." "Amelia," he repeated, as if testing the taste of her name. And with those words, he walked away, following the bellhop towards the elevators. Amelia remained motionless, feeling a strange mix of emotions. On the one hand, the satisfaction of having used her Russian. On the other, the sudden awareness of her colleagues' surprised glances. "Since when do you speak Russian?" Robert asked, gaping. "Since university," she replied simply, returning to her post and her rag, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But something had changed. She felt it, as if a cold wind had entered through the door along with that stranger, stirring the dust accumulated on her abandoned dreams. The rest of the morning passed normally. Amelia continued with her usual tasks, cleaning the lobby, checking public restrooms, polishing mirrors. She worked with methodical efficiency, but her mind kept returning to that brief exchange. Mid-morning, while cleaning tables in the tea lounge, the supervisor approached her with hurried steps. "Amelia, they need you in the restaurant," he informed her with a tone that mixed surprise and a certain discomfort. "The Russian guest is having breakfast and can't be understood by the waiters." Amelia felt a tingling in her stomach. She took off her gloves, smoothed her uniform, and followed the supervisor to the hotel's elegant restaurant. There, seated by a window overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, was Dmitry Volkov reviewing documents on his tablet, while a waiter waited nervously beside him. "Good morning, Mr. Volkov," Amelia greeted in English, then switched to Russian. "Can I help you with your order?" Volkov's face lit up when he saw her, a reaction that did not go unnoticed by the supervisor, who observed the scene with interest. "Ah," he said, closing his tablet. "I wanted tea. Black tea, strong, like in Russia." "Of course," she replied, and translated the order to the waiter, adding details about how Russians prefer their tea. "And you, will you have something with me?" he asked, pointing to the empty chair opposite him. Amelia glanced at the supervisor, who discreetly shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Volkov, I'm working," she replied in Russian. He understood, but didn't seem willing to let her go so easily. "Where did you learn Russian? It's not common." "At university. I specialized in Russian literature," she replied, aware of the supervisor's impatient gaze. "Russian literature?" A genuine smile appeared on his face. "Tolstoy? Dostoevsky?" "Dostoevsky is my favorite," she confessed, and for a moment she forgot where she was, who he was, and who she was. "Mine too," he replied, and added in Russian, "Beauty will save the world." "The idiot." She identified the quote immediately. A gleam of admiration appeared in Volkov's eyes, but before he could say more, the supervisor cleared his throat loudly. "Amelia, when you're done here, They need you on the second floor." She understood, remembering her place. "Your tea will be with you in a moment, Mr. Volkov," she said, resuming her professional tone. "If you need anything else, you can ask the staff to call me." He watched her walk away with a thoughtful expression. Amelia felt his gaze on her back as she walked towards the restaurant exit. What would that man think of her? A simple cleaning lady who happened to speak his language? A curiosity in a foreign country? It shouldn't matter, she told herself. Men like Dmitry Volkov did not belong in her world. They were like characters from those Russian novels she loved so much, distant, complex, inhabiting parallel realities that only crossed paths on written pages, never in real life. And yet, as she climbed the stairs to the second floor, she couldn't help but wonder if she would have another chance to speak with him. If those blue eyes would look at her again as if they truly saw her. The afternoon slowly passed as Amelia cleaned the rooms on the third floor. Her movements were mechanical, perfected after months of practice, but her mind wandered far away. She replayed the words exchanged with Dmitry Volkov again and again. That man who had appeared out of nowhere, bringing with him the echo of a life she had left behind. "Have you heard?" Chloe entered the room Amelia was finishing cleaning, her eyes bright with excitement. "The Russian from 5 is Dmitry Volkov, the tech magnate. They say his company is worth billions." Amelia continued, changing the sheet unfazed. "And what does that matter? He's just another guest." "A guest who looked at you like you were a book he wanted to read," Chloe retorted with a mischievous smile. "Plus, I heard he asked about you at reception." This last caught Amelia's attention, and she paused for a moment before continuing her task. What did he want? "I don't know exactly. He told Robert he needed someone who spoke Russian to help him with some business calls. Robert told him you were the only one who could help him." Amelia sighed. On the one hand, the idea of spending more time with that man aroused a curiosity she hadn't felt in a long time. On the other hand, she knew she shouldn't get her hopes up. For people like Volkov, she was nothing more than a tool, a useful resource in a time of need. "I have work to do," she said, trying to sound indifferent. "Well, finish quickly. The supervisor is looking for you." Indeed. Half an hour later, Amelia found herself in front of the door of Suite 5 Vimov, her heart inexplicably pounding. She knocked gently and waited. When the door opened, Dmitry Volkov appeared, dressed in an immaculate white shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and dark trousers. Without the jacket and tie, he seemed more approachable, though no less imposing. "Amelia," he said, and her name in that deep voice sounded different, almost as if it were another word. "The supervisor told me you needed help with some calls," she replied in Russian, maintaining professionalism. "Yes, please come in." He stepped aside to let her enter. The suite was spacious and bright, with large windows offering a panoramic view of London. The desk by the window was covered with documents and an open laptop. "I have a video conference with Moscow in 15 minutes, he explained. "Normally I wouldn't need help, but there are technical terms in English that I need to include in the contract. I need to make sure everything is correct." "I'm not a professional translator," Amelia warned. "My specialty is literature, not business." He smiled slightly. "I know, but I trust someone who loves words more than an automatic translator." That unexpected compliment took her by surprise. Amelia understood and sat where he indicated next to the desk. For the next hour, Amelia found herself immersed in a world completely different from her own. Dmitry spoke with authority and precision with his partners in Moscow, discussing details of a technological project she barely understood. Occasionally, he asked her to translate a specific term or to explain some particularity of technical English. What surprised her most was not the man's obvious wealth or power, but the passion with which he spoke of his work. He was not simply a businessman, he was someone with a vision. When the video conference ended, Dmitri leaned back in his chair with a sigh of satisfaction. "Perfect. The contract will be signed tomorrow," he said, switching to English with that marked but understandable accent. "Thank you, Amelia. You have been a great help." "I'm glad," she replied, preparing to leave. "If you don't need anything else." "Wait," he stopped her. "I wanted to ask you something. Why is an expert in Russian literature working as a cleaner in a hotel?" The question, though asked without malice, touched a sensitive spot. Amelia hesitated for a moment before answering. "Life doesn't always follow the path we plan," she finally said. "I studied what I loved, not what the market needed. And you haven't tried to find work as a translator? You clearly have talent." "I tried," she admitted. "For 2 years I sent resumes to publishers, translation agencies, cultural centers, but without professional experience, no one gave me a chance. And then the crisis came. My parents lost their business, and I had to accept the first thing I found." Dmitri watched her carefully, as if he was evaluating not only her words, but also what she wasn't saying. "Do you still read Russian literature?" "Every night." A small smile played on her lips. "It's my escape." He understood. "My mother was the same," he said, surprising her with that personal turn. "Spanish like you, but in love with Russia through her books. That's how she met my father, working as a flight attendant on flights to Moscow, always with a Russian book in her hands." "Your mother was Spanish?" Amelia asked, remembering that he had booked under the name Dmitri, not Maxim. "Yes, from Valencia. She named me Dmitri, though my father always called me Maxim. I grew up in Russia with him, but she taught me English during the summers I spent here." That personal detail established a strange intimacy between them. They were not just the millionaire and the cleaner. They were two people connected by a thread woven with Russian words and Spanish roots. "Is she in Valencia now?" Amelia asked. A shadow crossed Dmitri's face. "No, she passed away 3 years ago. In fact, I'm in Spain to resolve matters related to her inheritance." "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. "It was she who taught me to love books," he continued, looking out the window towards the Mediterranean horizon. "My father was a practical man, of numbers and facts. She was pure imagination and feeling." The sound of the suite phone interrupted that moment. Dmitri answered briefly in English, and then turned to Amelia. "My afternoon meeting has been moved up," he said, with some regret. "I must prepare." Amelia understood, and stood up, aware that this parenthesis in her routine had ended. She would be invisible again, cleaning rooms, existing on the periphery of lives like Dmitri Volkov's. "Of course, thank you for trusting me with the translation." He accompanied her to the door, but before opening it, he stopped. "I have another video conference tomorrow, more complex than today's," he said, like someone making a sudden decision. "Could you help me again? I'll tell your supervisor it's a service I've specifically requested." Amelia knew she should decline, that the more time she spent with that man, the more painful it would be to return to her reality. But the words that came out of her mouth were different. "Yes, of course." "What time?" "At 10, and afterwards, if you don't mind, I'd like to invite you to lunch." The surprise must have shown on her face, because he quickly added, "To thank you for your help, of course, and perhaps to talk about Dostoevsky." "I don't know if that would be appropriate," she replied, aware of her position at the hotel. "I understand," he said, and for an instant he seemed genuinely disappointed. "Then just the video conference." Amelia understood, and left the suite feeling a strange mix of relief and disappointment. As she walked down the hallway to the service elevator, she wondered if she had done the right thing by declining that invitation. Wasn't this exactly the kind of opportunity she had been waiting for? A half-open door to the world she had prepared for years? But she also knew that real life was not like the Russian novels she loved so much. In real life, Emilius didn't end up with Dimitris. In real life, fairy tales were just that. Tales. Upon reaching the cleaning room, she found her supervisor waiting for her with a serious expression. "May I ask what you were doing in Mr. Volkov's suite for so long?" he asked in an accusatory tone. "He asked me for help with a translation for a business video conference," she replied calmly. "You yourself sent me there. For a quick consultation, not for you to spend a whole hour," he retorted. "Amelia, do you know it's not well regarded for staff to get too involved with guests?" "I was working," she defended herself. "Besides, he's asked me to come back tomorrow for another video conference." The supervisor stared at her before sighing. "Mr. Volkov is an important client. If he has requested your services as a translator, we cannot refuse. But remember your position, Amelia. Don't get confused." Those last words stuck in her mind for the rest of her shift. Don't get confused. As if she didn't perfectly know her place, as if she needed to be reminded. When her workday ended, she left the hotel through the service entrance. The London sky was beginning to turn orange and pink, and the air smelled of the sea. Amelia paused for a moment to contemplate the beauty of that sunset, wondering what Dmitri Volkov would see from the windows of his luxurious suite. She shook her head, trying to push those thoughts away. Tomorrow would be just another video conference, another service rendered, another entry in the hotel logbook. Nothing more. But as she walked towards the bus stop, she couldn't help but remember the look in Dmitri's eyes when they had talked about Russian literature, about his mother, about the books they both loved. For a brief moment, they hadn't been the millionaire and the cleaner. They had just been two people speaking the same language. And she wasn't referring to Russian. Amelia's small apartment in the Islington borough was lit by the dim light of a table lamp. Sitting on her worn sofa, legs tucked under a blanket, an open book on her lap, she tried to concentrate on Tolstoy's words. But for the first time in years, not even the pages of Anna Karenina managed to transport her away from her reality. Her mind returned again and again to Suite 512, to Dmitri Volkov's deep voice quoting Dostoevsky, to the way his blue eyes seemed to light up when he spoke of the books his mother had taught him to love. "You're being ridiculous," she said aloud, closing the book harder than necessary. She got up and walked to the small kitchen to make herself some tea. As the water boiled, she observed her fragmented reflection in the window. She wasn't vain, but she wasn't blind either. She knew she had a pleasant face, with large dark eyes, and a smile her father had always described as capable of lighting up a room. But today she wasn't smiling. Today she wondered what Dmitri Volkov really saw when he looked at her. A curiosity? A useful tool? Or something more? The kettle's whistle pulled her from her thoughts. She poured her tea and returned to the sofa, this time without the book. Instead, she picked up her old laptop and, yielding to an impulse, searched for Dmitri Volkov online. The results confirmed what Chloe had told her. Dmitri was the founder and CEO of Voltec, a technology company specializing in artificial intelligence that had revolutionized several industrial sectors. The photographs showed a serious man in corporate settings, very different from the one who had shared memories of his Spanish mother with her. A recent article mentioned his arrival in the UK to expand operations in the European market. Nothing about a maternal inheritance. Had he lied to her? Or had he simply shared with her a truth he didn't consider relevant for economic journalists? She closed the laptop, feeling strangely guilty, as if she had violated his privacy. She reminded herself that there was no point in dwelling on this. Tomorrow she would help Dmitri with his video conference, and then their paths would diverge, each returning to their respective worlds. With that thought, she went to sleep, though sleep was slow to come. The next morning, Amelia arrived at the hotel half an hour earlier than usual. She had taken a little more care with her appearance, applying a touch of subtle makeup and pulling her hair back into a neat ponytail instead of the hurried bun she usually wore. "Any special occasion?" Chloe asked with a knowing smile when she saw her in the dressing room. "Just want to be presentable for the video conference," Amelia replied, adjusting her uniform. "Of course, the video conference." Chloe made air quotes with her fingers. "Half the hotel is talking about how the millionaire Russian has personally requested you." Amelia sighed. Rumors spread quickly in places like that. "I'm just helping him with translations. It's my job." "Translating isn't your job, cleaning is," Chloe retorted without malice. "But I'm happy for you. It's an opportunity, isn't it? Maybe you can get something better than scrubbing floors." Those words resonated in Amelia's mind as she rode the elevator to the 5th floor. Was that what she was doing? Looking for a way out? An opportunity to escape her current situation? When she arrived at Suite 512, she paused for a moment to calm her breathing before knocking. The door opened almost immediately, as if Dmitri had been waiting. "Good morning, Amelia," he greeted in English, with that slight smile that seemed reserved only for her. "Come in, please." The suite was no longer in the immaculate state of the previous day. Papers were scattered on the table, a half-finished coffee cup, and the computer showed graphs and diagrams that Amelia didn't understand. "I've been preparing the presentation since 5 a.m., he explained, following her gaze. "The video conference is with potential investors in St. Petersburg. It's important." There was something in his tone that caught Amelia's attention, a vulnerability she hadn't perceived before. "Are you nervous, Mr. Volkov?" she asked, surprised. He let out a brief laugh. "Dmitri, please. And yes, a little. This project is personal, not just business." "What exactly is it about?" Dmitri hesitated for an instant, as if he was deciding how much to share. "It's a literary translation system," he finally said. "Artificial intelligence capable of translating not just words, but the soul of a text, to preserve what is lost between languages." Amelia's eyes widened with genuine interest. "Like emotions, cultural nuances?" "Exactly," he nodded enthusiastically. "Imagine being able to read Pushkin in English and feel exactly what a Russian feels reading it in their original language. Or for a Russian to experience Shakespeare as you experience him." "It's ambitious," she commented, impressed. "And possibly impossible," he admitted, with a self-deprecating smile. "But my mother used to say that the best things in life seem impossible until someone makes them happen." And that mention of his mother created an invisible bridge between them, momentarily breaking down the barriers of class and circumstance. "Is that why you're in the UK?" Amelia dared to ask. "For this project?" Dmitri looked at her intently, as if evaluating whether to trust her completely. "In part," he finally replied. "The project began with my mother's books. She translated Russian poetry into Spanish, just for herself. When she passed away, I found her notebooks." His voice cracked slightly. "No one should lose the beauty of those translations just because they're in a language they don't understand." The sincerity of that confession touched something deep in Amelia. It wasn't the story she expected from a tech magnate. "It's a beautiful tribute," she said softly. The computer beeped, reminding them of the imminent video conference. Dmitri straightened, resuming his professional posture. "I'll need you to help me with specific technical terms in English. especially related to linguistics," he explained, pointing to some notes. "And I also want you to listen carefully. Your perspective as a philologist will be valuable." "My perspective?" Amelia asked, surprised. "Of course. You are exactly the kind of person for whom we are creating this." Before she could reply, the video call began. For the next hour, Amelia watched Dmitry transform into the confident, charismatic businessman she had seen in the internet photographs. He spoke passionately about algorithms, linguistic patterns, and learning models, while the Russian investors listened with expressions that ranged from skepticism to fascination. Occasionally, Dmitry asked for her help to explain some specific linguistic concept in English, and Amelia responded with precision and clarity, surprising herself by how comfortable she felt in that environment. When one of the investors asked about the commercial viability of the project, Dmitry did something unexpected. "I present Amelia Davies," he said in Russian, turning the camera towards her. "A philology graduate specializing in Russian literature. Amelia, could you explain to them why this project would be valuable from your professional perspective?" Surprised, Amelia found herself speaking to men whose fortunes would probably be the GDP of small countries. But instead of being intimidated, she focused on what really mattered. The books, the words, the magic that happens when one language becomes another without losing its essence. She spoke of Dostoevsky and how different translations could completely transform the reader's experience. Of the frustration of knowing that something was always lost in the process, and how a system like the one Dmitry proposed could revolutionize not only the publishing market, but cultural understanding between nations. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, the oldest of the investors nodded in approval. "Impressive," he said in Russian. "Is she part of your team, Mr. Volkov?" Dmitry looked at Amelia with an unreadable expression before replying, "We are in discussions." The rest of the video conference went favorably. The investors seemed convinced, promising to send their final decision in the next few days. When the call ended, Dmitry leaned back in his chair with a sigh of relief. "You did it," Amelia said with a smile. They were enthusiastic. "We did it," he corrected. "Your intervention was decisive." She shook her head, downplaying it. "I just told the truth. It's a fascinating project." "And you are fascinating, Amelia Davies," he said, with an intensity that made her hold her breath. "What you said about Dostoevsky, about the layers of meaning lost in translation, is exactly what I've been trying to explain to the engineers for months." He stood up and walked to the window, contemplating the city for a moment before turning to her. "My lunch invitation is still open, and it's not just to thank you for your help," he said frankly. "It's because I want to continue this conversation outside these four walls, without the clock ticking, without your uniform constantly reminding us of our supposed positions." Amelia felt her heart race. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, to immerse herself in the possibility of what could be, but another part, the practical part, that had learned to survive in a world that rarely offered second chances, kept her cautious. "I don't think it's a good idea," she finally said. "My supervisor has already warned me about confusing things." "And what things could you be confusing, Amelia?" he asked, taking a step closer. She stood firm, though she felt something inside her dangerously swaying. Reality. "This," he gestured, pointing to the luxurious suite, "is not my world. And tomorrow, or the day after, you will leave. You will return to your life. And I will still be here, cleaning rooms. Unless you choose something different," he said softly. "People like me don't always have the luxury of choosing." A shadow of frustration crossed Dmitry's face. "That's not true, and you know it. There are always choices, Amelia. Some harder than others, but they exist. Says someone who has probably never had to choose between paying rent or buying food, she retorted, more harshly than she intended. A tense silence settled between them. Dmitri recoiled, as if her words had physically struck him. "You're right," he finally said. "I can't pretend to understand your circumstances, but you can't pretend to know mine either." Amelia felt she had crossed a line. She had judged this man based solely on his current wealth, without considering his journey to get there. "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. "I shouldn't have assumed." "No, you're partly right," he interrupted. "My concerns today are different from yours. But it wasn't always like that, Amelia. My father may have been Russian, but he wasn't rich. My mother was a flight attendant, not an heiress. Everything I have, I built from scratch." Something in his tone told Amelia he was telling the truth, and that changed things, though she wasn't sure exactly how or why. "Anyway," he continued, his voice softer, "I understand your position. I won't insist on lunch, but I'd like to offer you something different." "What?" she asked, intrigued despite her caution. "A job, as a linguistic consultant for the project we discussed. Your knowledge would be invaluable, and the pay would be considerably better than this." He gestured towards her uniform. The offer left her speechless. It was what she had dreamed of for years, using her education, her passion for languages, in something meaningful. And yet, "Is it out of pity?" she asked, needing to know. "It's out of admiration," he replied without hesitation. "I don't offer jobs out of pity, Amelia. Vaultec didn't get where it is by hiring people who don't deserve it." She slowly understood, processing what this meant. "I need to think about it," she finally said. "Of course," he replied, returning to his professional tone. "Take all the time you need. I'll be in London until Sunday." They looked at each other in silence for a moment, and Amelia felt something invisible but powerful weaving between them. It wasn't just the professional offer, it wasn't just the literary project. There was something more, something neither of them dared to name yet. "Thank you for trusting me with this," she finally said. "With your mother's legacy." "She would have appreciated you," he replied softly. "A Spaniard in love with Russian words. You were kindred spirits in that." The mention of kindred spirits floated between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Amelia took another sip of wine, aware that she was on the verge of a change that would completely transform her life. And for the first time in a long time, the idea of change didn't terrify her. It excited her. The next morning dawned with a clarity Amelia hadn't felt in a long time. As she walked towards the hotel for her shift, the streets of London seemed different, as if the entire city had changed overnight. But she knew it was she who had changed. She had made her decision. During her shift, she worked with her mind set on what would come next. Every room she cleaned, every surface she polished, she saw them as final chapters of a story that was about to conclude. Not without a certain nostalgia, but with the certainty that she was doing the right thing. Mid-morning, she asked to speak with her supervisor. She found him in his small office, reviewing schedules with a tired expression. "Mr. Davies, I need to speak with you," Amelia said from the doorway. The man looked up, a shadow of irritation crossing his face. "Yes, it's about Mr. Volkov again." "It's about my resignation," she interrupted firmly. That caught his attention. The supervisor straightened in his chair, watching her with a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Resignation? Have you found another job?" "Yes," Amelia replied. "As a linguistic consultant." She didn't go into detail, but it wasn't necessary. The man's expression changed, moving from surprise to understanding. "The Russian," he said, nodding slowly. He hired you. He offered me a professional opportunity commensurate with my training, she clarified, maintaining a neutral tone. I can stay until the end of the week, so as not to leave you in a bind. The supervisor studied her for a moment before letting out a resigned sigh. I always knew you were too smart for this job, Davies, he admitted, surprising her. But I didn't think you'd leave here like this. He gestured vaguely with his hand. Like what? She asked, feeling she needed to clarify something. It's not what you think. It's a real job, based on my abilities. I wasn't implying anything else, he replied with a small smile. Although half the staff is speculating about your relationship with the Russian millionaire. Amelia felt herself blush. Rumors were inevitable, she supposed. There's no relationship, she clarified. Just a professional opportunity. For now, he commented, and before she could reply, he added, All right, I accept your resignation. Finish the week, and we'll be even. As she left the office, Amelia felt lighter. The first barrier had been overcome. Now the most important thing remained, to communicate her decision to Dmitri. At 6 p.m, when her shift ended, Amelia headed to the main elevator instead of the service one. For the first time, she would go up to the 5th floor as an equal, not as an employee. She had changed out of her uniform into the clothes she had brought, a simple blue dress that highlighted the color of her eyes. While the elevator ascended, she felt a tingling of anticipation in her stomach. Was she taking the right decision? Wasn't it all too sudden? Too perfect? A part of her still feared waking up and discovering that it had all been an elaborate dream, born from reading too many Russian classics with their intricate plots and impossible coincidences. But when she knocked on the door of Suite 5 and saw the expression on Dmitri's face as he opened it, she knew this was real. The genuine joy in his eyes could not be faked. Amelia, he said, and as always, her name in that voice sounded like something precious. Come in, please. The suite was different. The papers and documents had disappeared from the desk. Instead, on the table by the window, there was a thick manuscript bound in worn red leather and a bottle of Spanish wine with 2 glasses. I brought something to show you, Dmitri said, pointing to the manuscript. My mother's work. Amelia approached with reverence. The manuscript looked old, but well cared for, like a beloved object that had been handled with love for years. May I? She asked, extending her hand. Please, he nodded. That's why I brought it. Amelia opened the manuscript carefully. The pages were filled with elegant, flowing handwriting, with annotations in the margins in 2 languages. The translation was beautiful, capturing the essence of Dostoevsky without losing the musicality of English. Even on a quick read, she could appreciate the talent and dedication behind each line. It's magnificent, she said sincerely. Your mother had a gift. I know, he replied, with a touch of pride and melancholy. Wine. As Dmitri poured the wine, Amelia continued to leaf through the manuscript until she reached the last complete page. After it, there were several pages with fragmentary notes, ideas, possible alternative translations. But the continuous text abruptly broke off in the middle of a crucial conversation between Ivan and Alyosha Karamazov. This is where she ended, Dmitri said, offering her a glass. She had a stroke while working on this page. The doctors said she was probably writing at the moment it occurred. The image was painfully poetic, a passionate translator, falling in the midst of the words she loved. Amelia felt a lump in her throat. I'm so sorry, she said, accepting the glass. Me too, he replied. But there's something beautiful in it, don't you think? To be doing what you love until the very end. Amelia understood perfectly. They both shared a moment of silence, a small tribute to Elena Volkov and her unfinished work. "I've made my decision," Amelia finally said, gathering courage. "I accept your offer." The smile that lit up Dmitri's face was like a sunrise, transforming his usually serious features into something radiant. "You won't regret it," he said, with a conviction that was contagious. "This project will change the way the world experiences translated literature." "It's not just for the project," she admitted, feeling she should be completely honest. "It's for the opportunity to work with this," she pointed to the manuscript, "to be part of completing something so beautiful and meaningful." Dmitri nodded, understanding. "I understand you perfectly," he said, and by the way he looked at her, Amelia knew it was true. "For me too, it's personal. It's not just about business or technology." He walked to the window, contemplating London illuminated by the sunset lights. "You know, when my mother died, I felt I had lost my connection to Spain, to this part of me," he continued, speaking more to himself than to her. "I came out of obligation, for legal matters, never for pleasure. Until this week," he turned to her, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes that Amelia hadn't seen before. "Until I heard you speaking Russian in the middle of a hotel lobby, offering me tea as if it were the most natural thing in the world." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She had spent the last few days trying to convince herself that the attraction she felt was one-sided, that for Dmitri, she was just a valuable piece for his project. But the way he looked at her now left little room for doubt. "It was just tea," she said, trying to lighten the moment with humor. "It was much more than tea," he replied, taking a step closer. "It was recognition. It was—" he searched for the right word. "An encounter." The word floated between them, loaded with meaning. In Russian, встреча, encounter, had almost mystical connotations in literature, the moment when two souls destined to meet finally cross paths. "Dmitri," she began, feeling she needed to clarify something important. "I want you to know that I'm accepting this job on its merits, not because of—" she gestured between them, "whatever is happening here." He nodded, appreciating her frankness. "I know. I wouldn't have offered you the position if I didn't sincerely believe you are the most qualified person." He paused, holding her gaze. "But it would be dishonest if I denied that I am also attracted to you, Amelia, as a person, as a woman." His direct honesty was refreshing. There were no games, no subterfuge, just the truth, laid bare with the same clarity with which they discussed Russian literature. "I'm attracted to you too," she admitted, deciding to match his frankness. "But I'm afraid this will complicate everything. The job, your mother's project. Or perhaps it will enrich it," he suggested. "Perhaps this is exactly what the universe had planned." Amelia couldn't help but smile. The pragmatic businessman believes in the universe's plans. The pragmatic businessman is also the son of a Spanish romantic and a Russian fatalist, he replied with a grin. "Some things are in the blood." He took another step towards her, standing at a distance where she could feel the warmth of his body. "I propose something," he said. "Let's separate things. On one hand are our professional agreement with clear contracts and terms. On the other, this," he gestured between them, "which will progress at its own pace, without pressure or expectations." The proposal was sensible, mature, exactly what Amelia needed to hear to calm her fears. "That seems fair," she nodded. "Good," he said, and the intensity of his gaze made Amelia hold her breath. "In that case, may I kiss you now? Off the clock, of course." The unexpected humor made her laugh, breaking the tension. And in that laugh, in that moment of shared joy, she knew she was lost. "In the best possible way," Yes, she replied simply. Dmitri closed the distance between them with a single step. His hands framed Amelia's face with a surprising delicacy for a man of his size and presence. And when their lips met, it was as if two different languages finally found a perfect translation, without loss, without misunderstanding, just pure understanding. The kiss was soft at first, almost reverent, then deepened with an intensity that left Amelia breathless. When they finally parted, she kept her eyes closed for another moment, savoring the sensation. We are both fallen, both finished, and passion, Dmitri murmured against her lips. Amelia recognized the lines from Pasternak instantly. The fall of both, the end of both, and passion, she translated, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. You've always been the one to translate my words, he said with a smile. Perhaps we were destined for this from the beginning. Amelia didn't know whether to believe in destiny. The characters in her beloved Russian novels constantly struggled against it, sometimes succumbing, sometimes triumphing. But in this moment, with London glittering below them and Elena Volkov's manuscript as a silent witness, she felt that perhaps, just perhaps, some encounters were written in a language older than any humans could translate. Perhaps, she conceded, allowing herself for once the possibility of the extraordinary. Or perhaps you were just lucky that I was cleaning the reception that morning. Dmitri laughed, a rich, deep sound that Amelia decided she wanted to hear much more often. Whether destiny or chance, he said, taking her hands in his. I am grateful. And as the London sun set over them, bathing the room in golden and orange hues, Amelia thought about how strange and wonderful the world was, how a simple request in a hotel lobby could change the course of two lives, how words in any language had the power to unite what circumstance had separated. As if he had read her thoughts, Dmitri added in a whisper, I love you. And for the first time, Amelia didn't need to translate. Some phrases transcended all languages, resonating directly in the heart. The conference room at the Royal Gardens Hotel, London, was packed. Publishers, translators, academics, and literature enthusiasts occupied every available seat, while outside, the city shimmered under the May sun. On the podium, Amelia Davies adjusted the microphone, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. Beside her, Dmitri remained serene, with that quiet presence she had always admired. Welcome to the official presentation of The Brothers Karamazov, Elena Volkov Complete Edition, Amelia began, her voice clear and confident. A project that began as an act of love from a Spanish mother for Russian literature, and which today is completed thanks to her son's vision and the technology that has revolutionized the world of literary translation. As she spoke, her eyes swept over the audience until they found familiar faces in the front row. Chloe, who had left the hotel to study administration, Ivan Petrova, whose support had been crucial to the project's success, and her parents, who looked at her with undisguised pride. 2 years had passed since that night in the hotel suite, when Dmitri had shown her his mother's manuscript. 2 years of intense work, challenges, discoveries, and a love that had grown between them as naturally as words flow in a good translation. The Voltec system, Amelia continued, does not replace the human translator, but rather serves as a bridge between cultures, preserving nuances that were traditionally lost in the translation process. The collaboration between artificial intelligence and literary sensibility has allowed us to complete Elena Volkov's masterpiece with fidelity to her style and vision. Dmitri stepped forward to take the floor, and Amelia noticed how his gold ring gleamed under the lights. the same ring that echoed the one she had worn for 6 months, since they had married in a small ceremony by the Mediterranean Sea, with vows spoken in 3 languages: English, Russian, and the universal language of love. "This project was born out of loss," Dmitri said, his voice resonating in the room. "But it transformed into something much bigger thanks to an encounter that changed my life." His eyes met Amelia's for an instant, sharing a silent understanding that went beyond words. She instinctively brought a hand to her belly, where the most tangible proof of their union was growing. A tiny being who would carry in their veins Spanish passion and Russian soul, just like their father. The pregnancy, discovered just 3 weeks ago, was still their sweet secret. Amelia planned to tell Dmitri that very night, after the presentation, as a perfect culmination of this special day for both of them. The conference continued with the demonstration of the Voltec system, which had revolutionized the field of literary translation. Attendees were amazed to see how the technology captured not only the literal meaning of texts, but also their rhythm, cultural nuances, and underlying emotions. "And now," Amelia announced, reaching the climax of the presentation, "we have the honor of presenting the first printed edition of The Brothers Karamazov with Elena Volkov's complete translation, finalized with the assistance of Voltec and thoroughly reviewed by a team of Russian literature experts." Ivan Petrova walked onto the stage with a book bound in red leather, identical to the original manuscript, but complete, perfect. He handed it to Dmitri with a subtle bow, a gesture of respect for what that object represented. Dmitri held it carefully, as if it were the most valuable treasure in the world. And for him, it was. "My mother used to say that books are bridges," he said, his voice slightly broken by emotion. "Bridges between cultures, between hearts, between lives. Today we complete the bridge she began to build so many years ago." He opened the book and read a passage in Russian, and then the same fragment in his mother's English translation. The beauty of both versions drew murmurs of appreciation from the audience. "This book is her legacy," he continued, "but it is also the beginning of something new." As the presentation drew to a close and questions from the audience began, Amelia reflected on the extraordinary path that had led her to this moment. From hotel cleaner to head of Voltec's linguistic department, from a lonely woman who escaped into worlds of paper to a woman in love with a brilliant future opening before her, from a frustrated translator to a key player in a literary revolution, all because one day a Russian had asked for tea and she had understood his language. Hours later, as the euphoria of the successful presentation began to settle, Amelia and Dmitri returned to their apartment overlooking the Thames. The space they had created together, merging their worlds, Russian and English books sharing shelves, cutting-edge technology coexisting with inherited antiques from Elena's family, photographs of Moscow and London intertwined on the walls. "You were radiant today," Dmitri said, pouring her a glass of water as she took off her high heels. "Everyone was impressed with your presentation." "I was inspired," she smiled. "It's easy to speak with passion when you truly believe in something." She approached him and took his face in her hands, feeling the familiar warmth of his skin. "I have something to tell you," she whispered. Dmitri looked at her with curiosity, noticing something different in her expression. "What is it?" Amelia took his hand and guided it to her belly, still flat but full of promises. "We're writing a new chapter," she said softly. "One that won't need translation." She watched as understanding illuminated Dmitri's eyes, followed by a surge of emotion so intense that for a moment he seemed unable to speak. Joy, amazement, disbelief, love. Everything crossed his face in a symphony of pure feelings, He began, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, she confirmed. 3 months, according to the doctor. Our little miracle will arrive in winter. Dmitri enveloped her in an embrace as gentle as it was passionate, as if he feared hurting her, but couldn't hold back. When they separated, Amelia saw tears in his eyes. My mother always said that the best gifts in life come when you least expect them, he murmured, resting his forehead against hers. She was right, as always. I think she would have liked this, Amelia said, seeing us complete her work, start a family, unite her 2 worlds. No doubt, Dmitri nodded. In fact, he briefly pulled away to search for something in the inner pocket of his jacket. I wanted to give you this today, after the presentation. Now it seems even more appropriate. It was an envelope, and inside was a handwritten letter. Amelia immediately recognized Elena Volkov's handwriting. I found it yesterday, among her papers, Dmitri explained. It's a letter she never sent, addressed to her future grandchild. With trembling hands, Amelia unfolded the yellowed paper. It was dated 3 months before Elena's death. To the little one who will one day read these lines, it began. I don't know if I'll be there to meet you, but I want you to know that I already love you. Your father, my dear Dmitri, has the biggest heart I've ever known, though sometimes he hides it under layers of Russian pragmatism. I know he will find someone worthy of that heart, someone who understands the poetry of his soul, who can read between the lines as only true lovers of words know how to do. And from that union, you will be born, my love. Half Spanish, half Russian, completely wonderful. I leave you my love for books, for languages, for the invisible bridges that connect hearts through words. Take good care of them. With all my love, your grandmother, Elena. Tears ran freely down Amelia's cheeks as she finished reading. It was as if Elena had glimpsed the future, as if somehow she had known that her son would find a woman who shared his passion for Russian words. It's like she saw us, Amelia whispered, caressing the paper with reverence. Like she knew. Perhaps she did, Dmitri replied, hugging her from behind and resting his hands on the belly that housed their future. My mother always had a special intuition for these things. She used to say that some stories are written long before they happen. Amelia turned in his arms to look at him, feeling a wave of love so intense she could barely contain it. Do you think our story was written like this? She asked. That we were always destined to meet in that hotel lobby? Dmitri smiled, that gesture she had learned to love with every fiber of her being. I think some encounters are inevitable, he replied. As Tolstoy says, it's astonishing how complete is the delusion that beauty is goodness. You're mixing your quotes, Amelia laughed, recognizing the passage from Anna Karenina. That has nothing to do with destiny. But it has to do with us, he replied, caressing her cheek. With how I saw you that first morning, beautiful in your blue uniform, and instinctively knew there was goodness and depth in you. He kissed her then, with that perfect blend of tenderness and passion that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. A kiss that spoke of promises kept, and others yet to be fulfilled. When they parted, Amelia rested her head on Dmitri's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. You know what's most amazing? She murmured. That it all started with a simple tea, a tea I offered in Russian to a stranger who seemed lost. I wasn't lost, he corrected gently. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, waiting for you. And as the London sun set over them, bathing their shared home in golden and orange hues, Amelia thought about how extraordinary love was, how it transcended languages, social classes, circumstances, how it united what seemed impossible to unite. Like a good translation, love was not always literal or perfect. But when it captured the true essence, When it preserved the soul of what it translated, it created something more beautiful than the sum of its parts. And that was exactly what they had found. A perfect translation of the universal language of the heart. Thank you for joining us on this incredible story of resilience and empowerment. If you were moved by it, please like the video, share it with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring content.